Why do you hate Dutch culture?
Being with a Dutch person, you deserve a medal or a humanitarian award. We don't do romance in the Netherlands. We do paperwork.
You don't sound like a Dutch person.
Right.
It is absolutely something that you talk about having tried to train yourself.
Yeah, and it was funny because I remember friends and my mom, I called them and I said, hey, it's Roger, how's it going? And I remember them just being so confused on the phone. They're like, Roger, who's what Roger's calling? What Illinois farm boy is calling us up?
One last question that I want to ask you.
Okay.
What is wrong with sounding like a Dutch person?
It was just, I don't know, I think maybe it's because...
I'm Zach Newmark, and this is Damn Yankee, and that over there is Roger Bak. He is a great Amsterdam comedian who has been part of the English language comedy scene here in Amsterdam for most of the last 10 years. And he has just gotten funnier and keeps releasing more content. Roger, thank you for taking the time out and joining us today.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it. So excited to be here.
You don't sound like a Dutch person.
Right.
It is absolutely something that you talk about having tried to train yourself for ages not to sound like a Dutch person. What is wrong with sounding like a Dutch person?
It was just, I don't know, I think... Maybe it's because I'm from here that when it's too recognizable, like the Dutch accent just to me is so harsh, and it's funny. Now I get it, it's funny. It sounds funny. But especially when I was about to move to the US, and then when I just got there, it was just, my English was okay, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was. And so it took about a month and a half for me to kind of get rid of the actual, the impurities, let's say.
If you could get rid of Dutchisms in 6 weeks, that on its own is extremely impressive.
It was pretty, But I had a pretty good base because my mom was a flight attendant and her English is really good. And so she taught me a lot. And I feel like I have a bit of a feel for, just accents, whatever, and sounds in language. So living with a host family in Illinois and just not speaking Dutch essentially for a month and a half, just kind of did it.
Yeah.
But obviously
the Midwest will do that.
The Midwest will absolutely just hammer it out of you for sure. Yeah. And it was funny because I remember friends and my mom who lived in Michigan for my mom's best friend, she's from Permanent, so not too far from here. She moved there, I don't know, by now about 40 years ago. And I called them after a month of being in Illinois. And obviously they knew me as Rogier, and I called them and I said, hey, it's Roger, how's it going? And I remember them just being so confused on the phone. They're like, Roger, who's what Roger's calling?
Who's trying to ask me to borrow me some money?
What Illinois farm boy is calling it? So that was it was a cool sort of confirmation for me that I kind of gotten rid of, any sort of Dutchness in my speech. But to answer your question, obviously nothing's wrong with it. It's just really funny to me, and it sounds so harsh, that real, what they call the steenkolen English, that real heavy Dutch accent is a bit harsh to the old ear, I feel.
Is it?
For me.
For you, where in the Netherlands are you actually from?
So I was born here in Amsterdam, in West. I was going in West. And then I grew up in Nieuw-Vennep, Aalsmeer, and then Almere.
Oh, all the hot spots around the
all
airport.
All the hot spots, baby. Yeah. And so I grew up, when it was almost 4, we moved to Almere. Yeah. And then I was there until I was 18. And then I moved to the US.
Right. Couldn't get out fast enough.
Literally could not get out fast enough.
Had to get out of the polder.
Literally what I said when I graduated, the first thing I said is I can finally go to the US now.
Right.
I was so done.
What was it, that made you want to go to the US in the first place?
Basketball was one.
Mm-hmm.
It was my biggest passion. I started playing basketball when I was 10. It was just as soon as I feel like I'm a bit just naturally a little sort of single-minded about what I do with my life and my time. So if I'm passionate about something, I just go full force. And that at the time was basketball. And having spent some time with, for example, my mom's friends in Michigan, having been able to be on trips with my mom when she would fly, for her work, basically fly to the US. There was just a feeling in the US that I always had, literally just sort of in my chest. I was like, this is interesting. It's special. It's different. Everything that I liked as far as music or sports was there, the NBA and hip hop music that I really got into, the movies that I would watch, the TV shows, I forget what it's called. I think it's with that guy, Fred Savage. What was that?
When he was a kid?
Yeah.
The Wonder Years.
Yeah, The Wonder Years. There you go. I remember seeing that, and then seeing literally something as simple as like this, the way the sidewalks are in like suburbia, you know, like leading into like the driveways. That for some reason, that little detail to me, or like the round doorknobs, you know, with like where you press the little button to lock it, that kind of stuff. For some reason, that just caught my attention. And then being there, like, this is all real. This is where it is. And I just had this feeling like this is where I need to be.
Okay.
That was just the connection, basically.
How old are you now?
38.
Okay. So it was 20 years ago was when you actually moved to the US.
It's crazy. 2006.
Do you still have that same feeling about the US?
Yeah.
You do?
Despite all the stuff that's happening, I've become a little bit more disillusioned, and I'll be very, very careful because I do want to be able to visit the US still. But I've become a little bit more disillusioned, I think, with the way the country is run. Because I moved there in like the Bush years, and I remember that being kind of a weird time, and I was somewhat aware of like, it was
like what people wanted, because that was the same year I moved here.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go.
And that was all that people wanted to come up to me and talk about was,
really?
You know, how is it that this guy is your president, type of thing.
And
I was like, just you wait.
It's
just you wait. You got 20 years to ask me that question again.
Man. Did you have a feeling that it could get let's say worse, or could get crazier?
No, I actually had a feeling that they were going to come out of it, that you know, I had covered Barack Obama as a news figure for a number of years. So around when I moved here was when people were already starting to talk about,
you kind of felt that
is he going to run? Is he not going to run?
Oh, I see.
And I said very early on, if he runs, he has a very good chance of winning.
Right.
And also coming 8 years out of one party, you know, there's a tendency to swing a different way.
A bit of a different, like,
in the US, right?
Yeah.
But that's me. I want to know from you, you know, you moving out there during the Bush years, and it was a different time.
It was, but also it felt very welcoming, which funny enough now, I remember like back, you know, in like 2000, I remember we were like, I was just in high school and we were covering like the Bush, Gore like election. And we were somehow 12 years old, 13 years old. We were disappointed that Bush, I was going to say Trump, that Bush won. I remember I was thinking like, man, how could we let this get to this? And we're like in the Netherlands in high school, like in Almere. But I remember like already being kind of connected to it somehow, in some way. And I remember that time feeling like, man, how could this happen? This guy's in the White. And then now looking back on it, like those were the sane days.
Right.
And then of course, 2 years later, and I was living in California at the time. So first 2 years were in Illinois, then I moved to California for a 4-year school to finish my bachelor's, and then Obama got elected, and it was just this energy, this ecstatic energy, and it was cool and it was exciting, and I remember just being super proud of being able to live in the U.S.
And it helps, you know, also if you're in liberal places,
right? Of course,
you know, there were a lot of people who had a very
I wasn't living in
opinion.
Mississippi. They weren't
right.
It was a liberal bubble for sure. Which also is funny enough. I remember learning then kind of how LA, because I was living like just north of LA, like the San Fernando Valley, how that was a bit of a liberal bubble, obviously within a pretty red state, like outside of the major cities, San Francisco, maybe San Diego, like LA. There's a lot of like, you know, conservative politics happening. So
very much.
That was kind of interesting. And I feel like then I became a little bit more aware of like the actual political situation and how things worked. And obviously I had to take some like American history or like American politics classes as just like part of your general like college education. But it felt so welcoming and it felt so incredible to be there. And I just genuinely, and still I feel I you know, like I always say, like, I know the politics are crazy, but the people have always been so welcoming in the US, and especially, you know, people who might have like an immigrant background or who have family members who like are from a different place or are married, you know, like an immigrant or like an expat. And then to be part of like the American fabric and just, I remember like the feeling of being able to go there with my student visa, being let in and not having to leave after 3 months was just this thing. I was like, I've done it. This is it. I'm in. And then, a few years went by and I went back home after graduating in 2010, couldn't find a job here. And then I was here for 6 months. I was doing graphic design at the time.
And I mean, the economy was terrible at the time. Unemployment was high for the Netherlands at that time because we were coming out of the economic crisis.
Exactly. Couldn't find a job even at temp agencies. They literally told me, we have nothing for you. And I was like, I have a bachelor's degree. I'm capable of, like something. I can do something.
Right.
Nothing. There was zero. So I was like, okay, I didn't want to like stagnate. And I was like, okay, I couldn't find a job. So it was like, maybe I just need to go for like a master's degree. So then I went back to the US, applied for some schools, got in, and I was in Orange County at Cal State Fullerton for 6 months. And that just ended up not being a good program at all for graphic design.
Right.
Then I got offered a scholarship in Michigan at Michigan State, and that was really cool. And I was there for a year. And then by then, my now ex, she was living in New York, and I went to visit her on the 10th anniversary of 9/11.
As one does.
As one does.
As one does.
I gotta
really.
be. I gotta be in Mecca when it happened. So like when my Mecca, and I remember this again. This sort of feeling like this is where everything that I want is.
At ground zero.
At ground zero, right? Yeah. This is just, it's an inspiring place. Yeah, it's just, I just felt like, yeah, but literally we did go, we went as far as we could. Like, I think we like literally had lunch in like around the area that day, just, because there was obviously a lot of stuff happening and we weren't allowed like right there. I think it was like for family and, stuff like that. But just feeling on that trip, I was like, I think this is it. This is where I need to be.
Wow.
And then a year later, I was sort of in the process already of reapplying to a program, like an art school in New York. And then I got in with a like partial scholarship. They only offered like partial scholarships, but it was enough for me to be able to afford it and then go. And, that's where I spent like the last 3 years of my time in the US.
Okay. So a couple of things that I find very strange. All right. Because you didn't actually take your first comedy class until you were back in Amsterdam in 2016.
Yeah.
And I think that was at Boom Chicago.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
Okay. So an improv comedy theater here in Amsterdam. But you seem like somebody who's probably into comedy for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
You were in LA or around LA where you've got amazing comedy groups and courses if you want to, study improv. A lot of options.
Yeah.
You were in New York where you have amazing comedy groups and courses if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Tons of opportunity to do stand-up in New York and also LA.
Yeah.
Why did you wait so long to get into it?
It literally, I think, was just a matter of, it was two things, I think. Me choosing graphic design is like, this is the direction I've chosen. I have to stick to this. And it genuinely was a thing, was like, I don't want to disappoint like my mom. I didn't want to disappoint like, I don't know, maybe like, it was then with my girlfriend and like later fiance, like I didn't want to rock the boat too much. And I think like by the time I actually started in 2016, I think I'd been writing stuff just in a notebook or like on my phone for about like 3 years. So it was just a thing. And like growing up, I really liked doing like impressions and I loved, like comedy albums. Like the first two things I downloaded, like purchased and downloaded on iTunes were two comedy specials by Brian Regan and
Brian Regan's so funny.
Oh my God. Standing Up was, oh my God, just so unbelievably good. And goodness, what's his name? Area Spears.
Okay. Yeah.
One of his early stuff where he did like the Jay-Z and Snoop Dogg impressions and whatever. And I remember just being so mind blown by that. And this was like, I think they were both from like 2005, those albums.
So those were the first two that you purchased and downloaded. What were the first two you downloaded illegally?
I think that was a virus, actually. I think I think it was like Lil Jon or something, and like it was like that ruined the family computer. I think
right.
And that was. But I don't know if even like, I think that was like before I really sort of understood what comedy was. I think like the first comedy thing I ever saw was when I just got my first TV, or like my own TV in my bedroom. I don't know, like it might have been like 14 or something. I was like up at 1 or 2 in the morning and Eddie Murphy's Raw was on.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking like, this is unreal. And by then, like obviously my English wasn't as good as it is now. So I didn't understand maybe half of the stuff that he was talking about, but just the energy and like seeing someone like just interact with an audience and get laughs and something. There was something there. So maybe the seed was sort of planted then.
And then thinking Raw is funny and going backwards and finding his albums Delirious and Comedian and realizing just how much superior those sets are compared to Raw.
Yeah.
It's also
finding him so early in his,
it's also kind of, eye-opening if you're into comedy that, here's, I think when he did Raw, it was the biggest box office draw for a comedy special really? Ever.
Yeah.
And then here he had these 2 albums, which arguably much funnier.
Yeah.
So pretty impressive.
I thought, and like also I think obviously it wasn't until like years later where I realized like, oh, people, I don't know, just even like develop as an artist and they develop their material and their stage presence and whatever, they become a bit like that was all just way later. It was just like me seeing that thing on TV and just being sort of captivated. And then years later, sort of revisiting and being like, oh, there's a lot more to his work or to the career, and then finding other comics, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think like it was also just like there was always a bit of a fascination of like performing. Like as a kid, I did like some like background work on like a small movie or whatever here in the Netherlands, or I did like some voice stuff. So there was always something there, but I think it just took years of just kind of like leaving it behind or not thinking it would ever be something for me, and then slowly but surely easing myself into the idea of maybe I can one day do this, and then moving here, starting the workshops at Boom Chicago, and then having one of the cast members tell me you're actually funny was just, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like this was sort of the only validation I needed, the stamp of approval to actually go through with this. And then a year and a half later, I quit the design, like the graphic design job that I came here for, and just started doing like freelance stuff and pursuing acting and comedy.
What was it that made you actually move back to the Netherlands in the first place? Because you speak so eloquently about your enjoyment of the United States, or about American people, and what was it that actually had you come back?
A work visa. It didn't work out. I was at a studio at the time. My then fiance was also like she was going through the work visa process herself. She's from Finland, so she had to get her own visa, and she was with this really good company that did all the sponsorship for her. They even like paid for expedited like processing of the application, and she didn't end up getting it because there were so many applications as opposed to like in relation to the amount of visas that were available. So I was gonna apply the year after, and by then it was like sort of a lottery system that they had.
Right,
like
that's right.
For the H-1B, and I was just like, dude, I'm at this place that I'm not enjoying the work at, because it literally is one of those I always compare it to, and I hope somebody one day from that studio will see this. It felt like The Devil Wears Prada, but with a man at the helm, and he was like 50 at that point, like mid-50s. Brazilian gay man who was just so overbearing. Like when he would walk into the studio, everyone just like, put their like
clamp down.
Yeah, exactly. And just sort of pretended they were like working, and everything was just all of a sudden shut down. And it was just such a weird environment to be in. So they told me, we can sponsor you on paper, but you're going to have to pay for the whole thing yourself. And by that time, I think it was like a $5,000-$6,000 application process, and if you didn't get it, you could get like, I don't know, I want to say like half of it back. I was like, I can't take like
eventually,
eventually, right? Whenever they get around to sending you a check that you can only cash in the U.S.
Right.
I was like, I don't think this gamble is the right thing, and so like we discussed it obviously, with my fiance at the time, and like we just decided like, we probably should just go back to Europe. It had been almost 10 years by that, because it was 2015. And we were like, we might just have to sort of regroup, go back to Europe, see what we can establish there. And then in a year or two, we'll probably be back in the US. And then now, obviously, 10 years later.
Right.
Still here.
10 years later, still here, not with the Finnish fiance slash wife slash
so
girlfriend.
There's a lot
of,
a lot of like, obviously like COVID happened or whatever. So there's a lot of, sort of turbulence in between there. But ultimately, it just took me also a little while, I think, to like get acclimated here in Amsterdam. Having been away for so long and having to literally just readjust to like Dutch culture. I remember like
what you talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about in your comedy quite
Yeah.
a bit that, this chasm between, what it is to be living in the Netherlands versus the US.
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of startling how much of a like reverse culture shock it was for me. And I remember like one of the first days I think it was like visiting my mom, because we were living in Finland at the time for like a couple months. I was visiting my mom, and I got off the train here in Amsterdam, and I remember like, it sounds weird, but like I remember like watching just a group of Dutch people just get out of the train. I was like, I have nothing in common with you guys. Nothing. I don't identify with this group. And it's just, and I don't know why. Maybe it was also just my own disappointment in it not working out, and like feeling like a bit of a failure for, having this goal of going to the US and getting kind of close remotely, within the vicinity of getting a visa that would allow me to stay there. And then,
I mean, you were there. I mean, you were there and living there.
Yeah.
I mean, you were living a life
fully
there.
integrated.
It wasn't like,
no.
I mean, we're talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
It's not, you weren't just overstaying a student visa or something.
No, it was like
that.
Luckily, let that be on the record. I never overstayed. That is my worst nightmare. Oh my God. Yeah, no, but so because I basically after graduation, you're able to like work for a year, and like during school, you're able to work in like sort of specific environments, like anything related to your school. And so the year after I graduated with my master's, like we were able to stay in New York. And then it just literally kind of felt like we're packing up our lives, and just did this whole like, sort of apartment sale, like everything literally just had to go except for what we could fit in 2 suitcases each. And then it just felt like, we're packing up like almost 10 years of our lives.
Right.
And we're going back.
And being Dutch, you were too cheap to buy the extra suitcase.
No way. Yeah. Right. The 2 suitcases that were allotted, that's it. That's what we got to stay to. We actually did like move. I remember, oh my God, now that you mentioned it, we moved a lot of our stuff in. There was like so my ex-wife's like family friend, I think, was like an export-import guy who like from I think the Nordic countries to, I want to say the East Coast. I think it was like in New Jersey or something. I think we rented a van and just packed up a whole bunch of boxes, and we had like a portion of a shipping container that we put our stuff in, and that we were able to like move it to Finland. And then a couple months later in the summer, we unpacked like a container of our stuff there. And it was just like, just stuff that you would take from like the house, literally glasses, whatever, the household stuff. But then having to just get rid of like, the things that you have, and you're like the sort of the staples, like the furniture, your bed, your closets, whatever, all that, like the big pieces that we couldn't take with. So but now that you mentioned it, I was like, we did actually go a very cheap route and just like getting a leftover part of a container that just happened to be empty. Right. And I think we paid the guy a couple hundred sort of cash in hand. And he just like, took it from New Jersey to Finland. Right. Super random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, coming back and coming into Amsterdam, why did you guys decide to come? The 2 of you together.
Yes, so it was for my job as a designer. So I got a job here in Amsterdam with a studio.
She came with, and you were like, okay, Amsterdam it is. We're not going to Finland.
So Finland initially was cool, and she got a job there very quickly. I wasn't able to get a job because of just the language barrier, and it was just so tricky. And I just cannot sit still. I can't be like just looking for stuff endlessly. I can't, just be at the house and not have anything to do. So I was looking for work, and like I think that trip that I told you about when I was visiting my mom, when I got out of the train, I had this like disassociation with the Dutch. Yeah. I went to visit a few like design studios, just to say hi and introduce myself. And then this one studio that I walked into on Westerdok, so like close to the station, they had their door open. I walked in, I just introduced myself, and I left like a little business card that I had printed. And 2 weeks later, I got an email saying like, we're actually, one of our designers is leaving. Would you be interested in interviewing for the position? I was like, this is it. Yeah. And like the cool thing about Amsterdam, like Dutch design in general, but like maybe also Amsterdam studios, it's so highly respected in the design world globally. Like Dutch design is just a thing. I was like, this is the place I have to be for design. It's either like New York or Amsterdam for me. Right. And obviously New York not being an option at the time, Amsterdam was the next best thing. So then came back here and started working.
Yeah, but you felt that disconnect when you were coming off the train.
Yeah.
Did you also feel that in the office environment when you were
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because like I remember my then like the bosses of the partners of the studio, they told me like the way I spoke Dutch then, like I feel like it's changed now, but the way I spoke Dutch then to them sounded like I had learned Dutch abroad. And that I came back, and that it was like from like 10, 15 years prior, which made sense
you're like a language dinosaur. Yeah.
So because I never learned how to like in school, I never learned how to like write business emails in Dutch. So like certain words I had no idea, like just regular like business emails that you would write in Dutch, had no clue. So it was like these very sort of standard basic emails that I would write, and then slowly but surely, obviously, acclimated that way. But I remember kind of that being a bit of a struggle as well, like working in a Dutch company. Luckily, there was some like internationals there, so I was able to like also obviously communicate in English a lot. But just being in like a Dutch environment, like a professional environment, was really, really odd.
And at what point did the breakup happen?
COVID,
craziest
time. Yeah, right. Absolutely the most tumultuous time. It was the day of the first announcement of the first lockdown
in the Netherlands.
March
2020.
That's the one. That we decided to separate, and that initially we were like, okay, 2 weeks.
So you guys were married at this point, right?
Yeah. And it was because everyone thought it was going to be like 2-3 weeks or whatever,
right?
And we were like, okay, we'll be able to weather that storm, and then obviously that turned into several months, and just that everything coinciding at the same time, and while trying to do comedy, because it was just when everything had started to kind of ramp up for me. I was able to do like shows most days of the week.
Yeah.
Whereas like before, when I started, it was like you were lucky if you could get like 2 spots a week. And if anything was paid, it was even better.
Right.
Because initially as a comedian, like you're working a couple times a month, maybe, if you can find a spot, especially in a city where like English is obviously not the official language.
Yeah. And there are only so many clubs in Amsterdam to begin with.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And especially at that time, like right before COVID, I feel like it was a lot less happening. And then during COVID, I think people just got the idea like, oh, a lot of stuff can be taken away very quickly. We have to start producing our own stuff. And so then all of a sudden, all these shows started popping up left and right.
Yeah.
To the frustration of some people, I think, like people that have been in comedy for a lot longer, who have been able to run their shows kind of just on a monthly basis, and they would just post it on Facebook, and people would show up because it was the only thing that was happening once a month in that particular venue. And then things shifting that quickly from like maybe 2019 to 2020 or 21, when things really popped up, like mushroomed, all over the place. I think that was a really sort of a shift that a lot of like comedians who had been in the scene a lot longer were just like having to deal with all of a sudden. And for me, 2020 being like 2019 being the year where like things really started ramping up, and I was hosting a lot of shows, and I was able to kind of do, again, like I said, shows most days of the week. From that to nothing, and then COVID, and then the separation was just, it was insane. So so
was it like a Dutch separation where both of you are still living in the same apartment because there are no apartments left?
Yeah. We were lucky that apartment had a guest room, so we were able to like have separate rooms.
Wow. Which
was also insane because like we basically, our entire time in the US was spent together, apart from like a year and a half, almost 2 years, where like she was in Finland, I was in California, whatever, but it's still intertwined. Like our stories are still like intertwined.
You guys met in the States?
Yes.
In California?
No, in Illinois. First, in Illinois. Literally, we were both part of the same exchange program.
In Galesburg, Illinois.
Galesburg, Illinois. That's right. Yeah. And there's disagreement. Like we have a very good connect, like a bond now. We're like good friends or whatever, which I'm very grateful for. But there's disagreement on where exactly in the building we met, and I have my story and she has hers, which is funny.
Was that what led to the breakup?
Say what?
That's what led to the breakup.
This is ultimately what. Yeah. The seed was planted in 06. It was doomed to fail from the start. Yeah. But yeah, so all that happening together, and then like I started like producing my own show like a little bit later in 2020. Partially also because I was like, oh, things can change and disappear very quickly, and I really want to make sure that I keep getting enough stage time and developing as a comedian. And so I started doing that like late 2020 when we were allowed back, you know, with some like social separation, or what was that? Social distancing.
Yeah.
And from there, I think it just, you know, it kind of took on a different,
really escalated.
Yeah, it escalated. And then social media came into the picture in like early 2021. And that, you know, that's when it.
What was it that got you into that first class at Boom Chicago? Like what, you know?
Oh, the improv stuff?
Yeah, the timing of it. What was the reason for doing it when you did it?
I think partially sort of like a fabricated pressure in my own mind that I was 28 at the time. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to try this, I have to do it now. Otherwise I'm going to regret not doing this if I wait 10 years. It was like, okay, I'm about to be 30 in 2 years. What am I going to do? I don't want to live this life of like being in a studio or like a regular sort of, you know, office environment. If I'm going to do it, I need to do it now and see if I can make this work. And if it doesn't, I have time to sort of readjust and go back to like a regular job, quote unquote. So I think it was that. It was two, also just realizing what I missed a lot, and it sounds maybe a little like cliche, but it was just literally making people laugh being such a thing to me. I just love it so much still. And I think it's one of the sort of foundational elements to be doing comedy, which obviously is
it
a
helps.
slight part of
it helps. Yeah,
of doing comedy.
The making people laugh part is really the key to the comedy program.
It's sort of the thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just realizing that in my head is like, I just want to do that. And I felt like I put all this like sort of unnecessary pressure on myself when it came to design. I never felt like, and it sounds a lot sadder than what I intended to be, but I felt like it was never good enough in a meeting, or if I was pitching an idea that somebody else would have a better idea, or I saw somebody else's portfolio and I'm like, oh, I don't have that kind of a project. And I only have this, and I've never made a book, and you know, all that's, it was just these very unnecessary things to put in your own mind that early in a career, because it was only a few years of me being a designer.
Right.
And then I never had that with comedy, or like at least not, let me backtrack there a little bit, at least not to the same extent, because I think, you know, very early on, you're obviously finding a sort of a comedic voice or whatever, or like a stage presence of some kind, and inevitably will compare yourself to, you know, a comedian you like or whatever, you'll try to like model after. But it was never that same kind of pressure that I felt with comedy that I put on myself that I felt with design.
Right.
And so me realizing all those things are like that all coming together just made me think, I got to do it now. I Googled comedy classes or improv classes because I was really interested also in the idea of doing improv, because I felt like I could do it. And I just really enjoyed like the first class. It was kind of just a very basic introduction to improv. And, you know, like a name game or whatever, where you had to like say your name with a sound. Right. Just basic warm-ups. But that already, I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is fun. And I feel comfortable enough to do this in front of strangers. And so then it was like a 10-class package. And on the 10th class, it was Lolu Ajayi, who like used to be part of the cast at Boom.
What was the name?
Lolu Ajayi.
Okay.
And he's doing a lot of like acting now. He stepped away from Boom, I think, I want to say 2018. He was still on the cast then, and the show was so good. It was really cool to watch. And I remember just him teaching the class, and then we would be able to go and see the show later at night, and just seeing what he taught us sort of on stage live in front of like a full room at Boom Chicago. It was just so cool. And I remember just feeling that like you know, in a good way, I want to be up there. Like that should be me up on the stage. You know, the sort of classic thing when you're in the audience, you're like, no, that should be me. I just felt that with watching him do his thing after teaching us the workshop, basically. And then he started like a little improv troupe and wanted two of us to be part of it. And that was just, I was like, man,
cool.
This is the cosign. This is what I need.
Right. And so when was it, you know, what was the actual shift towards doing stand-up? Because that's really what, later, I mean, that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
More, it's stand-up. You're
not
at some point,
like, I think I did improv like a year or something, like a little bit over a year. And then I just noticed I just enjoyed stand-up more. And there's, you know, I'll say this very carefully, there's a cliquey nature to amateur improv that is very odd to me. That was always very strange. I'm like, nobody's eating off of anyone's plate, but there's somehow like, we have this little group and you're not allowed in unless you come and kiss the ring. And it really felt like that. Like people had to sort of like buy their way in with loyalty, which was really odd to me.
And should be clear, that's not like a Boom Chicago thing.
No, not
either.
a Boom Chicago. No,
it's like,
because they're professional. Like
it's
the
an
amateur
improv comedy
scene. Exactly.
Yeah,
I think it's a general. I've never been part of like the Boom cast or whatever, but I'm specifically talking about like the amateur or up and coming improv scene in the Netherlands, like the English one. And I just also enjoyed, like, basically it took, I think about like 5 or 6 months, I think, because I was in New York in like June of 2016, I believe it was June, when I was like, okay, I've felt comfortable enough to get on stage without having written anything, so I should be fine with something I've written. And that's when I did my first, like, I signed up for like an open mic at Stand Up New York, on the Upper West Side, and that was it. That's when that was the first open mic that I did.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And, also for people who don't know who you are, I mean, you've got, a pretty decent online presence.
Yeah.
A couple 100,000 followers on different social media platforms put together.
Yeah.
You're getting a lot of views on your content that you post to YouTube as well. So I'm kind of curious what that first hit was that you had that kind of started to, build up steam for you and for your career.
It was funny enough about a Dutch accent. Like, that's why it was so funny, like at the start of the interview, like to talk about that. Cause it was I think like around my birthday in 2020, I got this random DM on TikTok from a former NFL player who had like transitioned from being in the NFL to like doing content creation.
Okay.
His first name is Hakeem, and I forget his last name now, but I don't know if he was like trying to coach people in social media, like content creation or whatever, but he sent me a DM saying like, hey, I see that you've posted like some comedy content. I think you could go a lot farther with it if you just post consistently. I was like, this is what? Like, how does he reach me? Like,
right.
I think I had like 900 followers or something on TikTok at the time. So it was no chance that he would have seen a lot of the content that I had posted. And it was also just very basic stuff. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should just kind of go and try it. So like for a month from like my birthday to like late January, I just sort of posted every day and just did different things and followed different trends. And then it was 4 days in a row that something hit. Like the first one, I forget what it was exactly. The second one, I think, was like an accent video. And then day 3, 4. And on the 4th day, I did something about how to get a Dutch accent if you're not from the Netherlands. And that was just, it just went nuts. Yeah.
How do you get a Dutch accent if you're not from the Netherlands?
Well, I remember like some of the instructions were like, you flatten the vowels. Everything is very flat. The vowels are as flat as the country. There's no TH. It's just a T or D. Like, there goes my mother.
Right.
And my like the T is very hard. Like, so there's no like it's not like heart or like whatever, another word that ends in a T, heart, fart, whatever. But it's very like the T is like, you pronounce it very hard or whatever. So it's like my heart is hurting because my Heineken is warm. I think I had that line, and I think people like that a lot. So, and that like blew up. It was crazy. It was like. But also, it was the first time that anything went viral. And I initially remember thinking like, this is the wildest thing I've seen in my life. And within 24 hours, it was like on Radio 538. And it was like, I think on some like regional news or whatever.
Wow.
And then within 24 hours or 48 maybe at the most, it was kind of gone. And I remember thinking then, I was like, oh, this is just the process of going viral. It's so quick. And then people just move on. But luckily enough, it was enough of I don't know, maybe a hook for people to kind of pay attention a little bit. And so then I went very quickly to like 10K on YouTube, on TikTok. I started posting more consistently on Instagram as well. And that grew and grew. And then I started posting my stand-up content. And then it just sort of grew into what it is now.
Yeah. And what was the development for your stand-up career? I mean, you went from doing like any stand-up performer doing open mics and stuff like that. Yeah. You work with a couple of, other people here to put together shows. Yeah. But I just want to read the list of some of the people that you've opened for because it's, it's pretty amazing. You and I were talking about Russell Howard earlier already. David Cross, you've opened for. Phil Hanley, you've opened for. Nimesh Patel, you've opened for. Yeah. I mean, they're not small names.
Right. Yeah. It was cool. And I think it's also like, that was all like in the last 2 years, basically, that I think, the sort of the luxury of being in Amsterdam as an English comic, because the pond is obviously not, or like the whatever you call it, the pond de bowl is not very large. So you get stage time pretty quickly. I think a lot quicker than you would in like the UK or the US. And then if you have a bit of a presence in the community, when a touring comic comes through, I think very quickly you can sort of be picked out of the group, like, oh, you might be a good person to open for this act on their tour show here specifically in Amsterdam.
Was that first big one that you opened?
The first big one was actually at the Meervaart, and it was Maximini, who now has gotten massive. At the time he was already big, but he was like, I think, bigger in like the Persian community all over the world. I mean, it was Meervaart in their big room. It was like 800 seats, and it was the first time I ever did a show that big and opened for like an international act. And literally, I think the entire Persian community in Amsterdam came out to see their guy. And it was awesome. It was really cool to see. But it was also the first time where like I had to just get on stage while people were like filing in. So it was a bit of a weird, sort of unsettling first few minutes, and then finding my bearings a little bit and like realizing, I can pace myself through like this big of a room and be okay for 10 minutes, because I literally had like 10 minutes to do it. That was really cool. And so like he was also super nice about everything. He was very just sort of, like cool about like, he knew, I think, the circumstances of the show. So like there was no like, dude, you should have gotten him in the first 2 minutes. It just took a little while for them to even just, I think, notice me on stage.
Right.
So I think that was like I want to say this was, it couldn't have been 2020. I don't know exactly when this was, because it was like a full room. There was no social distancing.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it was like before COVID even. Anyway, long story short, that was the first guy that I opened for. And then the ones that you mentioned, like apart from Russell Howard, they were all at Boom Chicago, actually, at the main room. So it's always like a fun, like full circle moment to come back to that room to do something that's like a bit of a career milestone. To go and do that in the room where I like took the first improv workshop in 2016. I think that's always really cool.
And so you've got the special that you put out on YouTube that's made up from your show last year that you were doing called Made in USA.
Yeah.
Which sounds like something Borat would say.
Made in USA.
But, how was it that you put together that show? Because it's, I don't know, about 45, 50 minutes.
It's the cut is 40. Yeah, it was a little bit longer, the show that we shot. It was basically sort of a collection of like the material I'd done for the first like eight years of doing stand-up. Like I think the oldest bit in there, to be fair, was like 6 years old at the time.
Right.
And I think that's just a thing also with like a first special.
Are you putting that out, like when you did that, you put it out in December.
Yeah.
Was the idea of it to draw in new audience, or is the idea of it, really to put out, like, this is my hour show, now I'm going on to the next one?
A little bit of both, I think. Like it was sort of a nice natural way to like just close out that first tour and like the first show, because I'm trying to be better at literally when I start something to like fully finish it. Like I have a tendency, it might be self-diagnosed ADD or whatever, but like I just have a tendency at least to like kind of like, divert my attention if something's gone on for long enough. But with this specifically, I was like, okay, I want to make sure that the show is finished, meaning there's a special that's shot at the end in a place that I of my choosing, that ended up being Tobacco Theater here in Amsterdam, where I produced my first lineup show in Amsterdam. So it was kind of, that was a bit of a full circle, like poetic moment in a way. And the show was basically a collection of like, the first few years of doing stand-up and getting better, I think, at stand-up, and some of the stories that I felt were that would fit together in sort of a semi-narrative structure. It wasn't really like, this from start to finish, it wasn't like a fully set order or structure of the show, but it was at least like a cohesive whole, I felt. And then we shot it. I was supposed to do 2 shows. The second one didn't sell at all, so we combined the 2 together. Luckily, had a full room there, but it was really tough for the first few minutes. The crowd was a little cold, and I was like, I've got one chance to do this. And there's a like my cheeks are like really red in the start of the show, because I was just stressed on stage. I was really worried that people weren't going to like laugh more than what they were at at the start of the show. Luckily, there was a bit of a switch like early on with some crowd work, and that kind of like loosened everybody up. But I think for like a good 7-8 minutes, it was pretty rough at first.
In your head, where you were freaking out on stage?
Freaking out, absolutely, yeah. But also trying to like remind myself, like, I think you get this as you do more stand up through the years. You learn to deal with a tougher audience, a more stressful situation when something's not quite going right, that you can kind of like slow down, and you're not going to speed up, and you're not going to like panic. So I was able to kind of stay in that pocket. And then luckily, when there was a bit of a gift with the crowd work moment and things switched, then I felt fine. And then I was able to just kind of like coast through the show the way I wanted to, or not coast, but at least feel comfortable.
Did you pay for it out of pocket?
Everything. I always pay. I self-produced the whole thing.
So if it had bombed,
that would have been rough. That would have been rough.
Yeah. That would have been all, your whole investment on it would have been down.
The good thing was the film crew that did it, like it was, I used to work at this cafe that sadly went belly up. It was a really cool cafe called Public Space. And I was a freelancer at the cafe. And because of like the whole bankruptcy situation, I was essentially last in line to be able to get paid. There was no more money. And so this was a sort of a way to like make up for that, which I think would have been about the equivalent value of the money that I was owed for the months that I worked there still without getting paid. So it was a great sort of a silver lining in that whole situation. I was like, okay, if I'm going to get anything out of this, it would be this. And I wanted to shoot the special in the way that we shot it.
Yeah, because it looks good. Like a lot of times you see that first special and it's, one camera back of the room, wide shot the whole time or something like that.
No, this was great.
That's not yours. Yours actually, is nice looking, well lit.
It was like different angles. They had like somebody like walking around with a camera. That was a track that they ran back and forth, and there were like a few different angles. Like
I mean, it's a properly shot show.
Yeah. The only issue was we had an issue with the audio, and so like a lot of the show is my phone audio.
Oh no.
Yeah, that was like also just after actually having shot it and then like getting into the editing process that I was like, we can't use this.
Marcus and I literally just had a conversation a week ago about how audio engineers are probably the weirdest people on the planet.
Oh, I could imagine. Yeah, I could imagine.
Absolutely.
It was rough, but we ended up like being able to layer the phone audio, and thank God it worked well enough.
Yeah.
Because I think bad audio is worse than bad video in terms of like watching a special.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Any content.
Oh
yeah.
Man, I mean, on the one hand, these crazy dejecting moments of self-doubt that must have been popping up because when you're on stage and you're like, this is my last chance to get paid back for the time I've already worked. And then if that had blown up in your face, that would have been truly a harsh moment. Yeah. So how did you handle that on stage?
I think just sort of trying to rely on the years of having done this and not panicking too much, and just like I said, kind of slowing down instead of speeding up, because initially I feel as any comic will attest to, I think when you get nervous, you start like panicking and you speed up and you lose control over the situation. But now at least being able to like stay relatively calm and just stay in the pocket until something popped, and then sort of using that as a bit of a jumping off point, I guess, to like really get the show going.
Yeah.
But we ended up, because of all that stuff and because of like just some stuff that just didn't really work that would work in like different shows, but just happened to not get a pop at that one. I think we ended up cutting like 17, 18 minutes or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, if I can get to like 45, 48 ish, it's at least, it can be considered like a special. It's not like a half hour thing.
No, so it's a TV hour is 48 minutes, basically, right?
Yeah. So that's, I was so happy with that, like being what it is now. And it was, again, like just a nice way to close out that show and just be done with it and move on to the next thing.
Because some of the things that you talk about in that show, we've talked about your wife / ex-wife and, her culture from Finland and the culture clash there. And Finland enthusiasm is depression everywhere else, basically. You talk about a lot about your life growing up, with your mom who didn't allow you to swear, and here you grew up to be, like a big hip hop fan, which makes me curious if you went to Wu-Tang Clan last night. Like, I did,
I saw just now on AT5 this morning. I saw that they were here. Yeah, man.
It was good.
Did you go?
I did.
Oh, really?
I
did you meet the guys?
No. I went to the show.
Oh, okay. Because I saw they had like a sort of signing session.
An autograph thing. I didn't find out about that till this morning either.
Oh, that's so cool.
No, but the show was great.
One of the first concerts I actually saw was the first one when I was 15. It was G Unit when they were like at the height of their fame. I think it was like 03 or 04. And then the next one was actually the January before I left for the US. It was Method Man in Paradiso.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Unreal.
Yeah. And he was there last night. It was great.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
It was great. But anyway, I'm digressing completely. You're talking about a lot of these things in your show, and also, a lot of the Dutch American culture clash and the things that we were just talking about. But have you basically, now that you've shot it and it's out, have you thrown that away for the new work that you're doing now? I haven't really
fully thrown it away. Like, I'll do it at club sets sometimes if the moment's there and if I feel like it fits whatever that we're talking about in the moment. I've used it on some of like the tour shows, closing out the show if I feel like it's a little bit better locally to like end on something like that, like a thing about traveling to the US, for example. I'll do that. But basically the whole show is like new, different material from the first show, new material for this specific show, because I also wanted the theme of the show just to be very different than like national identity, because the first show was so much about like Dutch and American culture, the effects that it had on my life and how I identify with both. And for this show, I really just didn't want to like rely on national identity. I wanted it to be about like observations of, things that I see in the world. And the title in and of itself is a bit of a joke. It's Rogier Bak to the rescue. And so I'm essentially addressing my own problems and hopefully through that addressing some of the problems I see in the world. Fingers crossed. And I know it's probably an exercise in futility to do that, but it was a fun sort of jumping off point to like write new material within a certain theme or like under a certain umbrella.
Is your goal to actually shoot this also?
Yes, at some point. I don't know when. I'll give myself a little bit more time, because also a lot of the stuff has basically been written like the last year. Whereas, like I said, the first one was like 6 years in the making essentially. And I got so tired of the material at some point. It was like literally when we shot it last March, I was just, this has to just be it. I can't do this stuff anymore. And like in sequence, the way I have it now, it just got so tired. The material felt tired. It felt just kind of, it was like, I feel like I can get enough life out of it now still to like shoot it and be good. And then I really need to do other stuff. And I'll just really now enjoy like the process of writing stuff and actually finding jokes and like daily occurrences. The news, obviously the news is so crazy. Nowadays, especially.
What do you mean?
Oh, you haven't heard? So it's gotten a little bit more, I think a little bit more like observational, definitely more, in some ways more political. And especially also like one of the major themes I think in this new show has been like sort of that surge of like hyper masculinity and alpha male manosphere stuff that I think is just absolutely insane. And what I'm very happy about is that especially like some women after shows have said like it's really nice to hear this from a man, a straight white man, to hear some of these things and the criticism of what's happening there, because I feel like it gets a bit of a pass in media, like what these guys say and the things they say about like what masculinity is, the relationship between men and women, what women represent in society. And it's just, it's I don't want to be like, preachy about it, but I do think it's a cool and fun challenge for me to like make jokes about that in a way that's I don't know, like engaging and fun and also light and can kind of like challenge that whole, I don't know, that whole manosphere ideology.
What is it about that issue in general?
You mean about
topic?
The manosphere, like
what is it about that made it so appealing to you to
I think because maybe I didn't grow up with it, because I was raised by my dad passed away when I was 12. So basically my mom raised me in a very crucial time in my life, from like when I was 12 to obviously, let's say now, because obviously like she plays a big part of my life. But especially like the teenage years, obviously like very, very crucial in anybody's life. So seeing my mom be already, like when my dad was still alive, be essentially the breadwinner for the family and just the provider. And he was without a job for a long time. He couldn't work anymore because he had like an injury, et cetera, et cetera. And I think also his attitude, he was a really talented like writer. He was a journalist, like a music journalist. But he also had a sort of a grandiosity about himself. He had a bit of a, I don't know if it was like narcissism or if it was whatever it was, he essentially was pretty good at like blaming everybody else for his own issues rather than taking any accountability for his own failures, shortcomings, and just realizing that that is human. So me having grown up with a mom who was the breadwinner, who was the stable element in my house and who was the most reliable person in my life, I've never grown up with an influence of men telling me that women should be a certain way, or that women should be submissive to a man, or that women should play a household role. Because my mom never, like, I mean, she did that as in like she was militant about about the household. So I learned how to like iron my clothes and everything. That's a new, I have a bit about that in the new show as well. She made sure that the house was clean, but I had to help where I could. But I never got that like influence of a male figure being sort of this revered part of the household and the woman being subservient to that figure. So now looking at it, like I don't envy, or I feel for like young boys, young girls also who are growing up now in this world where like they open their phones and they see just the most, first of all, very black and white interpretation of male female relationships and just social status between people. And just how influential it is in their lives. And I can imagine that permeating into schools and then being part of like the peer pressure they feel, like you can't seem weak, you can't seem gay. And if you are, then that's your little, sort of the LGBTQ crowd, but then you're not part of like the real men, the real dudes who go through chicks as much as they can, but you can't get a woman if she slept with more than two guys. Like later in life or whatever, like there's just this super weird, like very tense polarization that I feel kids are subjected to that I luckily never had. I mean, the funny thing is I did listen to like hip hop and like, you were saying earlier, that was the complete opposite of what my mom essentially was teaching me. Right. Which also I have like in the new show. So that, but I think I was able to like just listen to that and sort of at least compartmentalize it in my head and also just realize, oh, what they're talking about is not necessarily what you should apply in real life or what, it works. Yeah. It's entertainment and it's something that is separate from reality. So I was able to at least sort of like see it that way and enjoy the music for what that was, without applying those lessons to my life or like my relationships.
How did your dad pass away?
He was, so there's a couple things actually. He had a pretty bad drinking problem. He was just, I think it was partially, I don't know if it was depression necessarily, but it was like disappointment in his life, his professional life, especially. He just couldn't like find work as much as he wanted to. And I think he felt he deserved. And I think he was just also a person who was like prone to addiction. So I think he'd always been sort of like a very social, he was very charismatic, very social, very like good in groups and whatever, good with like, networking and everything. Like we were talking about that earlier, obviously. But I think he just never knew where to like draw the line, between maybe his like social persona or like his outward persona and just like his home persona. I think everything just sort of blended together for him. And then when things didn't work out the way he had hoped, his career, he had been married before, obviously, that was maybe a thing that sort of like stuck with him for a while. And I think all that together with maybe, I don't know, being sort of prone to addiction, I think that all just kind of like became this knot that he got stuck in. So like when I was like, I think it was like 7, I started noticing that he was like pretty reliant on alcohol. And obviously at that time, you don't really know what that means or what that's called or what it is, but you feel like, okay, there's something off. About his behavior in certain ways, or like he was hiding like bottles in just like the most random places, literally like just buried it in like shallow like little ditches in the yard, and like the tree, you know, stuff like that. Just weird, like almost like squirrel behavior. Just really, and to see that as like a kid, and you see your obviously grown up dad doing that stuff, you're like the roles almost kind of reverse, where you become the parent and they become the child. And then I think that struggle with alcohol led him to be hospitalized, and then they told him, I remember, if you ever touch alcohol again, that will be the end of you. And then shortly after he got out of the hospital, he started drinking again, and then like within about like 2 years, it was over.
Wow.
Yeah. And he caught like a bad pneumonia, and it was like, I think his system was like so compromised at the time, like his immune system. So I think that all came together, and it was just like, yeah, the literal like death blow, I think. Yeah.
Was it something you were surprised by when you were 12?
Surprised in the sense that was possible, and like that your father can just not be there anymore, for sure. Because like it's the classic thing where for a couple of weeks I just felt like he would just walk into the room again and just be around.
Because you had a good relationship with him to that point.
Pretty good, yeah. Like I mean, he had his fair share of issues, and that was definitely something I at that point had become aware of. But I had a good enough relationship with him. Like he was very encouraging always of me. Like he just talked like a lot about like being confident, being you and doing your thing and whatever. So despite all the flaws he had, he was very like a sort of a at least a positive influence in that sense, and like teaching me to not be afraid to be myself and just be confident in what I want to do with my life, and being supportive in that way. But I definitely resented him pretty heavily for like, I don't know, 2-3 years, especially like right after he passed away. For essentially, I felt like he just sort of abandoned my mom and myself, and just kind of created this like resentment in my head towards him. And then in the years after that, it kind of just, you know, evened out a little bit. I was like, okay, well, he was actually just dealing with a lot of issues that he just had no like tools to deal with, you know?
Yeah.
I think he just felt like isolated. He felt like left out of his like professional circle. And you know, whatever, maybe he was dealing with a lot more stuff that we don't know about. But I've just become a little bit more, at least more like understanding, and like more just appreciative of like the good things he brought to my life as well.
Is this also why you're so kind of bothered by the Manosphere? Maybe as well. Yeah, I mean, maybe. You know, like a key component of that, or a key component of, you know, nationalism, for example, is, you know, blaming literally everybody else.
Yeah.
For the things that have gone, really, or for your life not being where you think it should be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm not even going to say the things that go wrong.
Yeah.
Just the things that you perceive.
Yeah.
As being, you know, at a lower position than where they should be.
Yeah, I think that could very well be. I think it's especially, like I said, me looking at the role of women in my life and the relationship I've always had with the women in my life, my grandmother, whatever. And maybe as like now that now that you mention it that way, like I think maybe seeing his behavior and not seeing that as something normal or something that I would want in my life for myself, or for any person for that matter. Maybe that is a part of why I'm so like resistant towards this like manosphere movement. And also like, yeah, what you're saying is not being able to like hold yourself accountable for anything. And I've made plenty of, you know, mistakes obviously in my life, but at least I feel I'm able to hold myself responsible, or like hold myself accountable, and learn from those things, instead of blaming women for my shortcomings just because I feel I should be given something or should be handed a career that I deserve somehow. I feel like, you know, I definitely believe in just working for what you want in your life and not being handed anything. And I say that knowing, like, you know, as a white straight man, obviously that's inherent in like my existence in like the Western world. There's certain things that will just be handed to me, but I feel at least being aware of that and calling it out when I see that being taken for granted, or being sort of used as an excuse why somebody is farther ahead in a career than somebody else who might be a woman, who might be like a person of color, rather than realizing an inherent privilege that comes with being a white man.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe, like you're saying, tying that into with the behavior that I saw in my dad. I think, there's probably a clear reason why I'm kind of resentful of that whole alpha man trend.
Yeah,
it's just the most annoying thing to me. I hate it so much. Yeah. So,
has it made you a better comic?
I think maybe.
Yeah.
I think because also obviously it's very easy to sort of like be considered woke or like overly woke or whatever, or sensitive or like liberal or whatever if you joke about that, because it's maybe also a bit of an easy subject to rally a pretty liberal audience around. You can be like, hey guys, I mean, yesterday we had like an improvised stand-up show, and like one of the notes said the solution to war. And I've been working on this bit about Kim Jong-un naming his daughter as his successor, and how I can't believe I'm on the same page as Kim Jong-un when it comes to women's rights. And I said, and like it was all improvised, and like in that moment I said, like I had a little bit first about how just an improvised bit on like how I think war could be ended, and then later I said, well, actually, I think what really could be the reason or the solution to war is that more women should be in power. And it's obviously a thing that people are like, yeah, of course, because it feels like a bit of a rallying point, and especially in a liberal place like the Netherlands, that's fairly easy to use if you want to just get an audience on your side. But I'm trying to actually make it funny and make the jokes about this topic, make them good and make them solid and make them interesting for a wider audience.
Yeah.
That it's not just me preaching like liberal values, but that I can actually sort of,
more women in power, like Kim Jong-un's daughter.
Exactly.
Like something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's, I don't know. That's, so I think that being aware of that and like trying to make sure that the jokes are actually solid and that the material is good and that it can work across a range of audiences. I feel like it's definitely, it's made me a better comic, I think.
With the comedy that you do, especially last year's set that you put out. So in the special that you put out, Made in USA.
Made in USA.
In that special, do you get pushback from Dutch people who watch your work?
Yes. Yeah. It hasn't been so much like in response to this special, but like some of the material that's in there before, I would get like some pushback. There's like one of the bits about like comparing the Netherlands and the US and how I feel the Dutch and the Americans are essentially the same kind of people. That was a big one.
Yeah.
People really didn't like that. And just something as simple as like being in an international relationship with a Dutch person. I thought that was really strange because it's, for me, like a very lighthearted bit where I just think it's incredible that an international, like a person not from the Netherlands would be with a Dutch person. I think it's a very brave choice. And like one of the lines was, if you're an international dating a Dutch person, you deserve a medal or a humanitarian award because it's an act of bravery, basically. And that was a thing, like when I first started posting that, it was like a couple of years ago, that people somehow were like very offended by that idea, which I think is a pretty lighthearted thing. And it was basically me sort of harping on the fact that we're just not the most romantic people in the world. Sort of a literal, to the point, relatively serious people. And somehow that hit a nerve.
Yeah.
So like it wasn't even anything political. It was just literally about like how romantic we are, and people were like, well, actually, we're pretty hot, actually. I think people are just so like, it's funny to me how like sometimes when you hear or like when you see what people actually respond to, and they'll pick something that I think is actually
innocent,
a very innocent thing, but people are just, maybe it feels like a personal attack.
Is there something about it that makes you want to double down on it and go like, even further over the next year? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think I'm not like a rage baiter. I don't like just put this out and be like, oh, the Dutch are going to love or like hate this. And they're, but it's a thing where I think it's important. And luckily, I mean, I've heard this, especially from people who've moved to the Netherlands, similar to, what happens in the Manosphere, and what I want to call out, like the behavior that I see, is what I'll do with these Dutch jokes. I want to just make Dutch people also aware of what they are perceived as by people not from the Netherlands, especially when they move here, and that it can be very difficult to like make Dutch friends, and that they aren't the most open and tolerant people, and that the tolerance is actually pretty paper thin, and that it's sort of contingent on a few factors, like what kind of job do you have, what do you add to the table, our table, and as long as you're not interfering with like not even my daily life, but just my awareness or something, or like my perception of daily life, as long as you're not in the way there, cool.
Right.
Just don't get in my either literal or metaphorical
as
way.
long as you're in your box and I'm in my box and our boxes aren't near each other.
Exactly.
That's my tolerance of you.
That's how I feel. That's what the tolerance is contingent on. So like me calling that out, I think is confronting maybe, but I think it's real and I think people experience it. So that I think is sometimes a little bit too much of an honest image, like self-reflection image that people find difficult to cope with.
Do you ever perform in Dutch, or is it really only in English?
I've done 10 or 11 shows in Dutch.
Yeah.
And so it's basically all English, and it's essentially I've gotten the question before, just like from people at shows, why I don't do it, and it's literally because one, it's just so time consuming to create material, and with everything that I'm doing with like producing the tour and like doing all my own promo and writing obviously and editing my videos, it just takes so much time. So then for me to also add a whole other language to my my box of things that I'm doing, and wanting to do it right and wanting to do it well, I think is just so time consuming, and it's going to take so much effort and like energy. And then also I feel like I'm just quicker on my feet. It's more comfortable. I can be more playful and relaxed in English. And
is English more fun of a language?
Way more fun for me.
Yeah.
Way more fun. And I will say, like, there's great Dutch comics, obviously, who do a great job with like word jokes and whatever. And they speak the language in a certain way that's just fun to listen to. For me, English lends itself to like, sort of like imagery, some like sort of certain like verbal devices, things that like, it's just a bit more of like a lively poetic language that I feel is very like malleable and playful. So I think in terms of what lends itself to comedy, for sure, for me at least, it's English.
What's your mom's opinion of the work that you're doing, whether it be the jokes about Dutch culture or the jokes about the Manosphere?
She's incredibly supportive, which I'm very happy about. I'm super stoked that she's such a positive part of comedy. Initially, I think when I first switched, I think she was very worried because it was like, what the hell is just leaving a job for this thing that's not even making any money, because it was not making any money with comedy at all. But I think she knows, like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to really, really try and really go for it. And I'm not just going to, not make any money. Somehow I'll figure out a way to do something to support myself. And now she's just become super supportive of the last few years. Basically, she comes to shows like fairly regularly, and she's heard all the stuff, like from sex jokes to politics to whatever. And initially I remember being so like, oh my God, I can't say this with my mom here, or like me trying weed, like whatever. She never knew that until like basically I said it on stage, and I think she probably knew, but like I never told her. To then hearing, yesterday I was on the phone with her, and she was really, she loves the US, like basically I would say in the same way that I do. She also had like, always had a very positive relationship with the country, and then now being so frustrated seeing where things are headed. And she was like, you know what? Whatever you want to say about this, you have my blessing, you go for it. And if it means I can't travel to the US anymore, so be it. So I think she's gotten so on my side about comedy. And what I love so much is that she'll share like the videos on Facebook, for example, and she'll actually show it to people. And it just means the world to have, my mom be part of that. And for me to never feel limited to do any jokes when she's in the room, nothing. I can say whatever. And I don't have that relationship off the stage with her necessarily. I won't swear in front of my mom, but on stage, I swear a lot. And she's just there, and it's all good. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Nice.
Yeah.
And, you were talking, you left graphic design for doing comedy, but you also do some other unusual jobs that we talked about before.
Yeah.
Because you did, something I'd never heard of with Cliquey, the Dutch-Japanese filmmaker who was a guest on this show. but she didn't bring this up. What was this weird job that you did with her?
It was compliment writing. It was where like, so that's how I met Kiriko. We were part of this company as freelancers, where you go to different events, private parties, corporate events, whatever. You go up to people, and based on like your first impression of that person, you write them a compliment card, and it's like 5-6 lines ideally is what sort of the length of the note should be. And it's just the most positive and sort of like purely positive thing I've ever done professionally. Especially also because it's very surprising to people when somebody comes up to them, asks their first name, and then just hands them a card that ideally has some resonance to who they are as a person. And sometimes it's beautiful. Like people really just tear up and they feel very seen, and they've gone through like a hard time or whatever. I've had that before at different events. And I think every one of the writers that has done that will attest to that. Like sometimes you just hit the nail on the head so much, or you hit someone in a certain moment in their lives where they've just come out of, I don't know, like a rehabilitation process or whatever. They went through illness and they're now sort of getting back on their feet. And you give them this like little gesture, and it's obviously all based on first impression. But the funny thing is you can obviously get a lot out of a first impression if you just know how to read it a little bit and put it into words. And people just feel very seen, and they feel very appreciative of this like very sort of genuine gesture. So it's really cool. I did it for a couple of years, but it's it's definitely now obviously this with comedy and everything, I just didn't have the time to keep doing that.
But you were writing these from observing people from across a room, or from interactions with them?
It could be here, like I could walk up to you and I was like, hey, what's your first name? Cool, Zach. Okay, I'm going to write you a compliment. I need 2-3 minutes. And then I would just essentially kind of observe first like your reaction to me asking you if I can write you a compliment, or what your name is. And so like if you see like somebody's avoiding eye contact, they could be a little bit shy, they could be hesitant, they could be a little bit reserved. Or if somebody's like, hell yeah, okay, show me what you got, then they're a little bit more outgoing. They might be a little bit more of an extrovert, So you can read a lot from that first interaction, and then just kind of seeing someone how they are in those like 2-3 minutes while you're writing that card says a lot. And so if you just learn to take that information and put it into a bit of a poetic narrative, some kind of it doesn't even have to be a narrative, but just some like some like basically like sort of nicer language than you would just like if someone was like, hey, I like your shirt, man, this is cool, I love the watch you're wearing. But if you're going like, okay, I love that watch because you know what, you're a guy who cares about other people's time, your own, whatever, like something, you have an appreciation for the limited amount of time you have in the world. So you want to get everything out of your life that you can possibly get out. If you can sort of extrapolate a little bit of like a poetic observation out of a detail in somebody's appearance or their reaction, I think that's what the cards are essentially about.
Okay. So what I'm wondering about this job is being a comedian and doing this thing where you're writing random compliments or not random, but where you're doing this thing where you're writing proper compliments for random people. Yeah. How difficult was it for you to shelve that part of your brain that wants to just comedy rip on them and make fun of them in that moment?
Well, I think every one of the writers there has at some point said like it would be so great to write like roast cards as well, because it's so much fun to do that. I think essentially it sort of comes from a similar place, but you just have to like you either take the right turn or the left turn, and then the left turn maybe is the positive version of your interpretation of somebody's like being or their your impression of them, and then the right turn would be the comedy club version where like you not necessarily roast people, but like where you find a joke, you find the comedy. And I think you can still do that like in the compliment writing thing as well. Sometimes people, you feel they're up for a joke, or they're cool with being like kind of pushed a little bit in their card, so you can write them a compliment that's actually kind of a bit of a roast, sort of a
backhanded compliment.
In a way, but like a sweet, like a sort of a backhanded like stroke of the face rather than like a slap. I feel like that's right.
Like a gentle
exactly like a little tap, like I know who you really are. Yeah.
With the compliment cards, did you ever lie? Was there a lie?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Do you remember one in particular?
I think I remember the situation where it's like a really just dull office environment where everyone is, oh my God, like, and it's hard to like to not sound mean, and I definitely don't mean it in that way, but like, it's just, I feel like everyone in an environment like that just sort of starts acting the same. They start dressing the same, behaving in certain ways that are just natural to that office environment. And then at some point after like 3 cards, you're like, I don't know what else to write, because you're all the same in this moment, in this context. So like, you gotta like, man, a red shirt, you're a passionate guy, I bet. Red Robin over here is just, he's a passionate bird, and he might not even, ever like take his wife out to dinner, but like, I don't know, something like that. You have to just pull it out of somewhere. And sometimes you get people who are like, that's not me at all. Like, what the hell? And he's like, well, it's my impression of you. And that's it. But I think generally, I'd say like 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of the 10 cards that you'll write, they actually do luckily have something of the person in that card.
Was there one where you had to write a card for somebody and you just thought, this is the most repulsive human being I've ever met? Or this is someone who I can't believe I have to do this for work, where I have to write something positive to say about this person?
I luckily, I've never like had to, it just made me think, like, if you're like sort of forced to go into like a government building and you have to like write for politicians or like for a dictator. The one that comes to mind now, I've never really had any, sometimes you just get a person who's like a little sleazy, or you're like, oh, you're sort of very clearly just, you're a very transactional person or whatever. The one that comes to mind was actually, and it wasn't necessarily repulsive, it was just kind of like annoying, at a massive party when like the music was blasting. It was really hard to hear people, and I had to write for this lady, and I if I just had to guess, and I know it's a controversial thing, you have to guess someone's age, maybe mid-40s ish, close to 50, and she was gone. She had used the open bar to her advantage, to the most of her abilities to still sort of stay on 2 feet. And I was writing for her, and she just kept like up and down, like stroking my leg as I was writing. And she was like sort of dancing close to me, and she's like, "Oh, I can't wait what you're gonna put on paper for me." And she's like constantly, and I'm trying to like pull away, but it's busy, so I can't really make space. And she just kept like getting closer and closer. And it's just the weirdest, like how familiar some people will be if they've never met you before. And they'll just get super close, or they'll like talk in your ear. And I'm like, I've just a minute ago met you, but it just sort of like the filters just disappeared. That was, I think, the most memorable one, where it was like, I feel this is what a lot of, because like the ladies wear a different outfit than we wore. We wore like red suits, and they have like dresses and like a big bow. And we had like a small, obviously like the bow tie. So they would get this shit all the time. They would get this from dudes who just like had one beer too many, or like who, just wanted to kind of let go because the wives are at home, and they're like, man, can I unwrap you? Are you a gift? Are you, is this for me? And then they, so.
And I'm sure by the 10th time that you hear that joke in a day, it just gets funnier. It just keeps getting funnier.
That's the thing about comedy, is as long as you repeat it as many times as possible, it just becomes better. The more you repeat it, the better
if
it
everybody
ages.
can think of the joke, it's probably the funny one.
So that was, I think, the most memorable one, where I was like, dude, this is just ridiculous, man. And I just couldn't, pull away as much, and I just handed the card to her and I walked away.
It's like you and alcohol go together like peanut butter and jelly, and see you later.
Yeah, it's a through line in my life that's caused, or like been the source of a lot of comedy, I think. Yeah.
All right. I have one last question that I want to ask you. Because you left here to then go to the U.S. and play basketball. Why don't you play korfball? I mean, so for anybody who doesn't know, korfball is maybe the most ludicrous game that I think I've ever seen.
It's worst facsimile of basketball I've ever seen in my life.
It's a basket, but it's a basket on top of a 15-foot pole.
Yes, it's a
that
woven
you can play
basket.
around on any side.
Yes.
There's no backboard.
Nothing.
With mixed gender teams. No contact. No real dribbling. You catch the ball. It's sort of like ultimate frisbee with with a volleyball. It's the worst. Kind of. And so why do you hate Dutch culture?
It's the co-ed nature of this game that I'm opposed to. Men and women should be separated on the korfball court. I think it's just all got to be. I literally, oh my god, I haven't thought about korfball in I think literally 20 years. But it's like you said, the silliest game. in the world. And if that's a representation of Dutch culture, then I don't want any part of it.
Is your goal actually, wait, kidding aside, is your goal actually to begin performing and touring in the US? Because you're going to be doing tour dates around Europe coming up, and we'll let people know where they can find that. But is your goal really to go back to the US 100%. And be touring around there?
Yes, at least what my sort of ideal scenario I think would be to be able to like split my time between here and there, but just to have the visa to be able to like tour in the US and like sell my own show and just like build up my following there a little bit more. In March I'm doing, or like later in the month I'm doing Canada for the first time, which is really exciting. But it's just because like the visa requirements are a little bit different there. Right. If you go there for a limited amount of time, you don't need like the full work visa. And in the US you have to have whatever
permission to earn,
literally permission to the grace of the big man to be able to actually just like sell your own ticket. So it's at the top of my list to be able to do that as soon as possible.
All right. So for people who want to see your show, which is Rogier Bak
to the rescue,
That's it. Yep. And your musings on both Korfball and the Manosphere. Where can they find you?
Instagram, I think, is the best way. So it's at Rogier Bak, ROGIERBAK. Live shows, I think, always are better than anything online. So the whole tour schedule is on my website on rogierbak.com. I think there's no replacement for live comedy. So I think that's the best way to do it. So I'm trying to hit more places in Europe and hopefully outside of Europe as well.
Are you doing any of the regular weekly stuff here in Amsterdam also?
You mean like the club shows?
Yeah.
A lot of like in Rotterdam, a lot of times at Comedy Club Haug, here Boom Chicago, Comedy Cafe. We run our own show in the Pipe in a small bar. So basically every day of the week I'm doing shows.
All right. That's great. Roger, thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. Damn Yankee is an NL Times podcast. The show is created by me and Peach Rizzo, and this episode was produced by Marcus Engel and Laura Bodger.